Om Asatoma Satgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. The subject of talk today is the avatar and the realized souls. And we have a guest speaker, Swami Nishpapananda. Swami Nishpapananda is a monk of the Ramakrishna Order of India and an assistant minister at the Vedanta Society of St. Louis, where he has resided since 1974. He became interested in Vedanta through college course work and joined the order in 1981 and received final monastic vows in India in 1995. So I welcome Swami Nishpapananda. He came to San Francisco to attend the Shanti Ashram retreat. So we are together in Shanti Ashram yesterday. He was the main speaker. We also got an opportunity to speak. Then I brought him from Shanti Ashram program, after the end of the Shanti Ashram program, to Sacramento. And he graciously agreed to give a talk this morning. This is his second visit, and he says that he had visited this place in 1979. So quite a number of years. So I'm very glad that he could be here, but he cannot spend more time because he has some other engagements in his center. So tomorrow morning, not exactly morning, in the afternoon, but rather noon, he will go away from here. So I'm very happy to welcome Swami Nishpapananda. So please make your presentation.
So, thank you, Swami Prapananandaji. I'm very happy that I was able to be here, that you asked me to be here. Now, unfortunately, you're going to have to hear me talk. So I don't know how well I can feel about that, but hopefully we'll all make the best of it. And I'm happy to meet your new assistant, Swami, who I had not known before. And really, when Swami Prapananandaji was showing me the center this morning after breakfast, I was realizing that, after so many years, I really needed a refresher, the Garden of the Saints and so on and so forth. But it reminded me how much devotional service, how much love has been cherished on this center from its inception, and that, just to have this continuity here of devotees and swamis, and this lovely space which has been created here. The physical space is just enviable, I can say. Coming from St. Louis, where we're making do in the architecture that was designed by a physician for his family in 1925, to come to an actual ashram where it's all designed with the, the intention of serving devotees in various ways, and you have proper rooms for that. And then to see how everything is kind of so open and free and inviting and easy, and you don't have to fight against the architecture all the time. Anyway, I should start on the topic. The Avatar and the realized soul. So there are two distinct types of spiritual teachers. They're the towering personalities: Sri Krishna, Lao Tzu, Buddha, Moses, Zoroaster, Jesus Christ, Muhammad. And they're the millions of rishis, saints, seers, and sages that have been born and died throughout time. Generally speaking, the great spiritual leaders of the first rank belong to three different categories. They're the prophets, those spiritual leaders that are regarded by their followers as prophets, like Moses and Muhammad. They're the messengers of God, Zoroaster and Lao Tzu. And they're the incarnations, or in Sanskrit, avatars. Sri Krishna, Jesus Christ, Buddha, Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Ramachandra, Sri Chaitanya. Swami Chaitanya, I've been with Swami Chaitananda now for 40 years, and most of you are probably familiar with him. He said, in this regard, he says, the incarnations feel very comfortable coming to India. They know that they'll die a natural death. That's his explanation, humorously. The prophets, messengers of God, and the avatar are distinct and far above the spiritual teachers who are saints, seers, and sages, realized souls. The prophets and messengers, the avatar, they come to earth at a critical stage. They establish a new spiritual order on the foundation of the old. As Christ says, I have come to fulfill, not to destroy. The same timeless spiritual message is delivered according to the changing conditions of history and psychology. They restate the ancient message and are regarded as the saviors of humanity. They lead humanity to true spiritual life. They turn human hearts from the search for the temporal to the search for the eternal. They stress the spiritual values first and foremost. Again, Christ, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all else shall be added unto you. Now that sounds a little strange. You think about it. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all else shall be added unto you. It says, when you attain the kingdom of God, what do you care about everything else? See? It's kind of a bait and switch tactic, which actually the avatars are pretty good at. But from another perspective, in order to seek the kingdom of God, you have to gain a certain amount of stability in your normal life. In order to do that, you have to practice the moral courses, the Dharma in Sanskrit. And what does that do? Dharma calms the mind. It stabilizes the emotions. With a calm mind, you can make good judgments. And with good judgment, you can proceed in the secular life, and you can do very well, or as well as you can with the attributes and qualifications that you have. So, in this sense, it's true. If you seek the kingdom of God, and you have that foundation of Dharma, then you also, just as a side benefit, do as well as you can in the world at the same time. It's not that bad. In a sense, the great spiritual teachers are a product of the age that they live in. They reflect in their lives and teachings the then current human situation. But they also create the age. They are epic makers. They give a new turn to the world. There's a vast difference in power between these two types, the realized soul and the avatar. After the passing of the avatar, and also the prophets and messengers of God, their power increases, their following expands. And it's relatively difficult for the ordinary person to recognize their greatness when they happen to stumble into them, before that greatness manifests. After the passing of a realized soul, his or her influence gradually diminishes. Christ had 12 apostles when he died, and now there are 1 billion members of the Catholic, just the Catholic Church, not to mention the other Christian denominations. Another difference between the Avatar and the realized soul. The Avatar descends from above. It's divine grace coming down to the human plane. The realized soul rises from below. From the human plane they attain immortality. From the imperfect they attain God realization. The Avatar is the best exemplar of his own teaching. The avatars are the best demonstrations of the spiritual ideals and principles. They're like ocean liners, whereas saints are like rafts that carry just a few passengers. You think of Huck, Finn, and Jim on their raft in the Mississippi that they cobbled together from driftwood and somehow tied together with whatever rope they could have. Well, they're kind of okay on it, but they got to think about the next person that might come down the pipe, whether they want to let them on the raft. They're usually there's room for one or two more, but you got to think about it after that. The Avatar is like a powerful locomotive that can pull hundreds of railway cars loaded with passengers across vast passages of time. The Avatar becomes a great source of inspiration to the world. In fact, God can be worshipped properly through the Avatar. Only. We're talking about worship here. You can't conceive of a better God. You can't conceive of God better than through the Avatar. We can't conceive of more all-embracing love, of more transcendental knowledge, of more unruffled peace, of more unalloyed joy. If you want to see the best illustration of divine love, divine purity, divine joy, divine wisdom, divine freedom and peace, we find it in these great ones. Again, Christ says, "He who has seen the Father has seen the Son." And we have to see the Father through the Son. Unless we are of that very small minority who can follow the path of knowledge, Jnana Yoga, directly to Nirguna Brahman. And it is a small minority. The intellect may conceive somehow or other of a vague picture of the impersonal aspect of divinity, but it is very difficult to align one's emotional nature with the impersonal. In order to move toward the spiritual ideal, our emotions have to align with that spiritual ideal. The impersonal aspect of God won't respond to our adoration in the way that the personal aspect of God responds. And we always expect a response. We live in a world of reciprocity. Our love expects return. Those who are qualified to follow the path of knowledge don't expect that return on their love for Nirguna Brahman. It's the peaceful attitude. It's the peaceful mood. So the vast majority of sincere spiritual aspirants need, well, when we understand the difficulty of the problem of changing our samskaras and our subconscious minds so that they're aligned with our conscious goals of seeking God and devotion and realizing God eventually, when we realize the difficulty of that challenge, it's easy to kind of think through it and say, oh yeah, I can do that. But when you actually start on it, that's a different thing. It's almost essential for all of us to have this example, this living example before us, that our emotions align with the Ishtadeva in order to proceed towards God. And when this desire to realize God, to become spiritual, comes to us, we don't want to just take our time, millions of lives. We want to be practical about it. That's why it's so important to study the life of the Avatar, to understand what spirituality really means, to receive that inspiration in our own lives, and also the motivation to put one foot in front of the other every day. There are those seekers who think that they should only study the spiritual truths and not the biographies of the great ones. But the great ones become the bridge between the heart and the head. They gave the same message through their lives that is stated in the Upanishads and the foundational scriptures. And it's what moves our feet. It's what moves our heart. It's what keeps us going and gets us going. Their message is one of inner purity and true devotion to God. Some recognize the characteristics of their chosen ideal manifesting in the different spiritual teachers of the world. Others don't unveil the masquerade and think their chosen ideal is the only one. The test of true devotion is not identifying the Lord with his costume. Now, I want to take a little time here and develop this. Life can be looked at as a masquerade party. From the point of reality with a capital R, it's a masquerade party. So imagine that someone with sufficient means had a masquerade party, say a big Halloween party, and they invited everyone. I mean everyone. The logistics are a little impractical. You have to use your imagination. And suppose everyone came. The only criteria is that everyone has to come wearing a different costume. You see, fortunately, we're all endowed with different costumes. Even identical twins have a different manifestation of their genotype. And at the end of the party, everyone has to take off their masquerade, their costume. And lo and behold, it's the same being living in each costume. You see? That's the odd. So we have to unveil the masquerade. Now, from the perspective of the Avatar, Sri Ramakrishna gives an illustration. He says the Avatar is like the break in the wall through which you see the Absolute. You know, in the old days, when you had a construction project, they didn't have this fancy stuff that they put up. Now they put up cheap plywood that had knot holes in it, you know? And you couldn't see over the wall. But you get up close, and if the knot hole's in the right place, you just get your eye up there, and the whole world opens up. You see what's going on the other side in the construction area. So you've got this wall. Okay, I'm going to expand on Sri Ramakrishna's wall. This wall is the wall of Maya. It's so high you can't get over it. It's so wide you can't get around it. It just goes on and on. not just through space, but through time as well. It's the wall of Maya, okay? And at distances in this wall, there are openings. And they're all irregularly shaped openings. And from a distance, they don't look too impressive, you see. But there's some light coming through these openings from the other side, and it draws you in. And at first, what you're attracted to is the shape of the opening. See? But as you get closer, the shape of that opening becomes less important than the light that's coming through it. And as you get up closer, it's like that little knothole in the construction. The wall is very big and the knothole is very small. But the closer you get, the more you can see on the other side. So when you get right up there, you can just walk right through to the other side. You're liberated. So one of the breaks in the wall is the shape of Christ, in other words, the shape of Buddha, in others, the shape of Sri Krishna, and so on and so forth. And from a distance, the shape seems to be important to us, but when we get up close, it's the light, and it draws us right through. So we shouldn't be confused by the masquerade party that we're all participating in as human beings, or the masquerade party in Sri Ramakrishna's illustration of the Avatara as the break in the wall. The avatars, the prophets, the messengers of God realize one truth. It's one supreme being that manifests his powers through all of these great ones. Swami Vivekananda, in talking about it, says, these great incarnations of God are to be worshipped. Not only so, they alone can be worshipped. On the days of their birth and on the days when they went out of this world, we ought to pay more particular reverence to them. In worshiping Christ, I would rather worship him just as he desires. On the day of his birth, I would rather worship him by fasting than feasting, by praying. When these great ones are thought of, they manifest themselves in our souls, and they make us like unto them. Our whole nature changes, and we become like unto them. When the great ones are adored and they manifest themselves in our souls, and they make us like unto them, the penetration of light into our heart through the intense love of the Avatar purifies our minds, purifies our hearts, and we become like them. We become transformed in that devotional process. Worship the chosen ideal of God with all your heart, but at the same time have due reverence for all of the spiritual saviors of the world. This is what the Vedanta teaches. Steadiness in our own particular path with due reverence for others. And it won't work to practice Hinduism one day, Islam the second day, Christianity the third day. It's like Sri Ramakrishna's example of trying to get water, you know. Swami was showing me you've got 2 wells here. You know, if they'd stopped at 10 feet because they found something every time they were digging for water here, you'd be paying the city rates to water the plants out. You don't get the water. Excuse me, I'm a little slow today. I'm always a little slow, but I'm a little slower today because, you know, my eyes are pretty old, and my bifocals are adjusted to a different distance. So I'm having a little harder. I'm improvising more than what I'm doing. Okay. The great service that the avatars give to this world is that they draw our attention to the unchanging laws in this ever-changing world. These things never become obsolete. They're both ancient and ever new. But they're subtle. That's the problem. And unless you have very remarkable demonstrations of these spiritual truths from time to time, they absolutely get buried. You know, unless you have a tradition which creates saints in that religious tradition over time, as the religion progresses in its history, unless you have saints that renew that faith, that can understand what the original intention was when the religion was started, that original intention will get buried. And the spirit of the religion will die. That's the test of the vitality of a religion. It must be able to create people, men and women of God who realize God. And we're all men and women of God. But we don't know it. That's the problem. We aren't aware of it. We become men and women of God when we recognize God and accept God as the goal of this life. No mean task. And then when we really reach God and find our eternal relationship with Him, then we become men and women of God in the true sense. These days, the common experience is to establish our relationship with family, society, nation, wealth, our own bodies, and forget God altogether. The truth is that the position is reversed. We find that He is our only Father because every other relationship is temporary. Father, mother, friend, companion. The normal human relationship is like talking to the person next to you on the airplane. When the plane lands, they finally get the departure gate open. Everyone's up with their luggage ready to go. You're on to the next life, you know. Hopefully we don't have to go on to the next life. But it's like that. And in heaven, and family reunions are okay. Thanksgiving and Christmas is okay. You know, if we have good families, we like to do that. But they're okay for now. But we wouldn't like them eternally. We want something better than that. This relationship between the individual soul and the Supreme Being must be discovered, must be recognized. And in that is the fulfillment of our dream for eternal life, the fulfillment for our dream of absolute perfection, of absolute peace and blessedness. This is the lesson that the great spiritual personalities, the great spiritual teachers deliver to us. The persons who follow the teachings of the great ones and realize God themselves experience their essential unity with divinity. They become realized souls. Then they don't identify themselves anymore with a particular country or particular race. They live in this world, and still they're above the world. They're super social. Their love for humanity becomes a phase of their love for God. Their love for society and family becomes a phase of their love for the divine being. It doesn't mean that they become indifferent to this world. They have love for the world, but that love is another phase of their love for the Supreme Being who enfolds all. So there are basically three grades of realized soul. The first grade of realized soul is like the gentlemen, again, it's Sri Ramakrishna's principle, who hear this awesome party on the other side of the wall. I mean, they're having the greatest time they've ever heard. And one after another, they scale the wall, and they see what's going on in this riotous party, and they say, ah, and they're gone. They realize God at the end of their life, and I'm out of here. I'm not coming back. And the friend who goes to the top of the wall and sees the riotous party and feels that pull, and at the same time, for some inexplicable reason, feels the pull in his heart from the side that he's lived on to this time, up to this time, saying, wait a minute, I gotta tell them that there's this riotous party over here. How will they know? He is the Jivan Mukta. He or she is the realized soul that lives as a realized soul, maintaining a relationship with God in this life, and they don't have anything that plays in their heart except compassion and love for other human beings. That's why they're here. Because they were able, for some inexplicable reason, to give up that infinite joy and say, hey, wait a minute, what about my friends? And they feel that tug from the Atman of everyone else, from the hearts of everyone else, and they come back. And the third are those special souls that Sri Ramakrishna called Ishwara Kodis, who are already realized. They come to earth with a special mission. It's not as extensive as the Avatar, but it's extremely important in the work of the Avatar. These were identified by Sri Ramakrishna in his incarnation. He mentioned 5 explicitly. But the other of his apostles, it's hard to distinguish, and it gets a little fuzzy. Swami Shivananda was not identified as an Ishwara Koti by Sri Ramakrishna, but he later said, by his grace I have become an Ishwara Koti. He says, what? Say they're all special. They don't really think about living a normal life. They don't think about artha and kama. It's just off the plate from the get-go as children. And you remember, Sri Ramakrishna had to go fishing around for Vivekananda. He had to go past the realm of forms into the realm of the Absolute and take the form of this divine child and coax Vivekananda to come down, you see? So, if we translate that into the life of the other avatars, as soon as Jesus Christ saw the fishermen, he recognized them as his apostles. He didn't make them fishers of men. They came for that purpose. And he recognized them, just as Ramakrishna recognized Sashi and Sarat as being among Christ's party, and Swami Vijnanananda being from the Brahma's party, and so on and so forth. So this highest class of realized souls, the Ishwara Kodis, come to assist the Avatar in his work. And how does this work? How does this work? Okay, we got time for this. Swami Saradananda, in that wonderful book he wrote, Spiritual Biography of Sri Ramakrishna, explains so many things that you don't find anywhere else. When we were trying to categorize Swami Chaitanandaji's translation of Sri Ramakrishna Leela Prasanga for the Library of Congress, they want a summary. You realize how hard that was? And they weren't giving us the book back. It was stuck somewhere because they didn't have any categories for it. Okay, this is narrated by Swami Saradananda in his book. And he says, sometime in 1884, a friend of ours came to Dakshineswar and found the master sitting in his room surrounded by the devotees. Now this is a little trick that you've got to understand. When he says a friend of ours came to Dakshineswar, he's talking about Swami Saradananda. He's talking about himself. He's trying to take himself out of it. But it's an eyewitness account, and he's his own friend here. Narendra was present. There arose the topic of the Vaishnava tradition, started by Sri Chaitanya. The master said, that doctrine teaches that one should always be careful to observe three things. The devotee should observe three things. Chanting God's name and a taste for that. Kindness to all beings, and serving God's devotees. No sooner had he uttered the words compassion for all beings than the master suddenly went into samadhi. Regaining partial external consciousness in a short time, he continued, speak of compassion for beings. Will you, clever animals, bestow compassion on other living beings? You wretch, who were you to bestow it? No, not compassion, but service to them as embodiments of the divine manifestation. It was Narendranath alone who, coming out of the room at the end of the master's samadhi, said, what a wonderful light I have gotten from the master's words. In synthesizing the Vedantic knowledge, which was generally regarded as dry, austere, and even cruel, with sweet devotion to the Divine Lord, what a new, sweet means of experiencing the truth he has revealed. And then he goes on to explain how that works, how this insight that was just given to them from the Master works through the path of knowledge, through the path of bhakti, through the path of meditation, and the path of karma. He saw that in a flash. No one else had an inkling for it. Don't want to go into the particular manifestations because you're already familiar with that. He understood that this was a shortcut in a busy secular age that would become more busy and more secular to gain purity and therefore realize God. Those sadhakas who adopt the yoga of action or the road of Raja Yoga to the realization of God will get a great light from those words. As we can't rest for a moment without doing work, it goes without saying that it is only work in the service of jivas as Shiva that should be done, and action done in that experience, in that spirit, will enable us to reach God sooner than otherwise. If the Divine Lord ever grants me an opportunity, I will proclaim everywhere in the world this wonderful truth heard today from the Master. I will preach it to the learned and the ignorant, to the rich and the poor, to the brahmanas and the chandalas. Which is what Swami Vivekananda did. And even after he came back from the West the first time and wanted to institute this, or institutionalize this through service work, famine relief and so forth. His brother disciples, Swami Premananda, Swami Yogananda, the Master didn't teach that. They were still resisting. He had to work so hard. It was such a pain in his heart that his own brother and disciples couldn't understand it. So you get this wonderful insight coming from the divine manifestation. And how did that come? He was stating in his ordinary kind of awareness, when he's not in samadhi, what Chaitanya said, those three things that we talked about. Taste for the name of God, compassion for other beings, service of devotee. He was saying that in an ordinary, when then what happened? He went into samadhi, and then he came back with this blast that Vivekananda understood among all the people that were there. So how does this epic-making change take place? It comes from the realm of samadhi. It's interpreted into the realm of words, And it's affected by those supremely capable, realized souls, the Ishvara Kodis, the apostles of the Avatar, that can translate, they can understand this, and that can do the translation work and get it put into action. So it's an extremely important role that's played in the manifestation of the divine in this world of ours. And I'm going to examples from Sri Ramakrishna because we know these things in such detail. And, you know, if Swami Sardananda had not given his interpreted biography of Sri Ramakrishna, I don't know if we would know these things. And he ends this report from his friend. We could not then comprehend the implications of Narendra's words, of the Ramakrishna's words. It was the supremely intelligent Narendranath who understood those divine words as far as is humanly possible and expressed from time to time their sublime significance to us, to our amazement. God men have both human and divine qualities, and it's not an act. When they play the role of a human being, they superimpose upon themselves a great deal of human nature. And they need to be understood in this human aspect. Otherwise, we don't get the full weight of their lives. We don't get the full inspiration that's there. And another way of stating the role of the Avatar, again, in Sri Ramakrishna's life, he would ask his devotees and the young men that would be his disciples, after they'd been there a while, he says, well, what do you think of me? And they all said something a little bit different. And it was a way for him to gauge where they were and what their understanding was, all that. When he asked Yogan, who became Swami Yogananda, his answer was, sir, you are neither a householder nor a monk. And Ramakrishna's reply was, how did you know such a truth? He nailed it, you see. He had this deep understanding. He was also considered to be an Ishvara Koti by Sri Ramakrishna. So let's look at this. There are four aims of life: Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Okay? Dharma is foundational. Okay? That's what defines us as human beings. If we aren't on the path of Dharma, we're clever animals. It's the foundation of human life, the moral path. Artha and Kama, that's wealth and pleasure, are what we're naturally inclined to pursue. And when we've had enough of it, then we switch to moksha, right? Let's do that now. We can't find the infinite through the finite. Let's just search for the infinite. So those are the classifications for human beings. But the Avatar comes with full knowledge. I mean, he just comes with a little bit of Tama so that the body can be held together and he can get a little bit of sleep, but not much. So, those human classifications don't work at all. You're neither a householder nor a monk. You're neither seeking the world nor are you seeking God. He comes with full knowledge, just a little veil. They come from the pull of our needs as human beings collectively for the infinite. They come to fulfill that need. They come to relieve human misery. Swami Vivekananda says, each avatar comes to suffer various vicarious atonement for everybody. What he's saying is that there's only one avatar, and that's what they do. So let's sum up here. What distinguishes the avatar from the realized soul? The realized soul discovers her own bondage at some point and switches from the path of pleasure to the quest for liberation, eventually realizing God. Most realized souls reach perfection by following the path chalked out by the Avatara. On the other hand, neither personal enjoyment nor liberation is the goal of the Avatara. Their intense sympathy and love for suffering of humanity induces them to take embodiment and discover paths to approach God according to the need of the time. They are epic makers. Ordinary souls have to overcome past samskaras from previous births in order to realize God. The Avatara is born without past samskaras. After leaving the body, the influence of the realized soul to inspire people to realize God gradually diminishes. After the passing of the Avatara, and also the prophets and messengers of God, their power increases and their following expands. A realized soul may suffer some physical discomfort when shouldering the responsibility for a disciple at the time of spiritual initiation. It happens. Each avatar, in Swami Vivekananda's words, quote, suffers vicarious atonement for every one of us, and also for all that are to come hereafter. A human being struggling for freedom, follows the path chalked out by the Avatar and becomes a realized soul. The realization of Nirguna Brahman is the same for the realized soul and for the Avatar, but the power manifested through the Avatar is immeasurably different. The Avatar awakens the cosmic Kundalini, and the realized soul comes along for the ride. Now, what does that mean? The Avatar awakens the cosmic Kundalini, and the realized soul comes along for the ride. Let's examine that a little bit and close. The Avatar awakens the cosmic Kundalini as a statement made by Swami Brahmananda when he was exhorting the monks in his training to spiritual practice. It's a phrase that was also used by Swami Shivananda under similar circumstances. The practical import is, you are in close time proximity to the life of Sri Ramakrishna. If you exert yourselves in spiritual practice now, you will find it much easier to realize God than if you were far away in time from his life. That's a practical import. In other words, he's saying, look, I know it's nice to be in my company and the company of Swami Shivananda and in the company of Swami Premananda. He says, but don't bask in that. He says, you guys have to get to work right now. Don't waste time. Realize God. And to Sri Ramakrishna's devotees, I mean, they thought it was just a piece of cake to get spiritual realization or bhava. You just go to the master and you cry importunately and he'd touch you or he'd do something, he'd take care of you. They had no idea what they were dealing with. Vijay Krishna Swami Goswami went on pilgrimage, and here and there, and interviewing all the realized souls, and he came back to Ramakrishna. He says, Master, you can't fool me now. He says, we think because you're so easily available, you're not in Benares, you're not in the Himalayas, you're just here at Dakshineswar, and you're so childlike and simple, you're hiding from us. He says, I'm on to you. I've been all over, there's no one else like you. On a subtle level, Sri Ramakrishna opened up new channels to God realization through his spiritual austerities and realizations. And those channels are wide open. The snow's been plowed, the salt's been put down. All we have to do is exert ourselves to become pure and subtle, and we have access to those open roads to God realization. Now, what does it mean for the illumined soul to go along for the ride? Does it mean, it sounds too easy, does it mean that the illumined soul puts her thumb out and gets picked up by a car driven by the Avatara and carried comfortably in a heated leather seat to the full realization of God? Or does it mean that the potential realized soul jumps onto the moving footboard of a crowded Calcutta bus and somehow grabs to the post between two open windows, holding on for dear life? Maybe. But I want to leave you with another image. Near our ashram in St. Louis is the walking path that we go on often. It's the most beautiful boulevard in St. Louis, and Swami Prapananandaji, I'm sure, has been on that with Swami Chaitananda because it's his normal walking path. It's a divided boulevard, and it's 2 miles long, and there's only one stoplight. It's 2 miles long, and it's 2 lanes wide, and there's only one driving lane. There's a parking lane and a bike lane, and because it's a very nice area, there are very few cars parked there. And on weekends, Saturday and Sunday morning, early, you'll see these bicycle riders. Actually, you'll hear these bicycle riders because they'll fill the whole width of that 2 lanes. And you can hear them from the other side of the hill as they come towards you because they're going pretty fast, and you can hear the sound of the wind that they create. And it gets, what is it? You hear it at first and you wonder what it is until you get used to it. And then that sound gets louder and louder. They come up at the top of the hill and you see all these guys riding really fast, and then whoosh, they're by you, and the sound diminishes, and then they come around because it's such a nice boulevard, and they go up again, and they come around, and they go about 8 miles, actually, doing that. So you hear the sound of the peloton, and the rider in the middle of that peloton has 40% less work to do because the wind resistance is broken by the leaders, not just the person that's at the very front of the V, but the riders that are in that V formation, the same thing that the geese use. The lead rider has a larger expenditure of energy, and this forces the lead to change constantly because no one can keep up that energy expenditure. So imagine that you've got a peloton that's led by the Avatara, and the riders in the V are his apostles, and the devotees line up behind them, and this peloton gets ever larger in time, wider and deeper in time. Well, you don't just go along for the ride. If you want to keep up with the Avatar, you have to pedal hard. You have to be in shape. You have to do your spiritual practices. You have to be moral. You have to love your neighbor as yourself. You have to have a clean conscience when you sit down to meditate. So you have to do your job. You have to work hard. You have to pedal fast. And you have to pay attention, because if your front wheel hits the back wheel of the rider in front of you, you could crash and cause a lot of trouble. But because the Avatar is up there doing all the work, if we do our parts, it's 40% less energy expenditure to realize God.